Okay, we are live. It is Friday, February 19th, Dr. Potts and Political Architect Show. It is our Shamrock Shake Friday. And every Friday is Shamrock Shake Friday until St. Patrick's Day. So, how is everyone? Welcome. Let's start with our newest doctor, Dr. Chris Tomlinson from Carroll County, the
How
land
you
of Larry
doing?
Hillmaniac and regular Americans that live in Maryland. Welcome.
How you doing? Yeah, Larry Halminiak's a good guy. He has helped guide me in many ways on the central committee and done a lot for me as far as networking and whatnot. Good guy.
Eh, And then we've got joining us, we have from the best part of Anne Arundel County. I think you are in the best part of the county again, right,
I
Jason?
am. I'm at home.
Jason,
The only
Jason
part of
Trot.
the county that doesn't have a McDonald's, so I have to travel to Calvert County to get a Shamrock Shake.
Really, there is no McDonald's in the southern Anne Arundel County.
No, well,
How can
Edgewater, but it's about 20 minutes away.
how can that be the best part of the county then if you can't get a Shamrock Shake? Just saying, North County people.
Well, Dwight, think of all the other weeks of the year when McDonald's is terrible.
That is true. And they have that war on the Irish, because Shamrock Shakes, it's like if you go at 12:01 at a 24-hour McDonald's, no Shamrock Shakes for you. That's the way they are. I know. And we're joined by Ryan Nyadak from Western Frozen, Virginia. How are you doing?
Western Virginia, not West Virginia, to be
I
fair.
said I said Frozen, Western Virginia. I did not say West by God. It'd be West by God, Virginia, if I said that.
Okay, there you go.
Welcome, Ryan. And the dean of all media watchdogs for over 30 years, Donald Irvine, chairman of Accent Academia. Welcome.
Thanks for.
Busy week.
Yep, it has been.
I tell you, as we were talking before in the Shamrock Room, uh, 2021, we lost Larry King and Rush Limbaugh. I figured we'll start with that, and I just want to share my Rush Limbaugh story. The first time, not what do you call it? My first time I saw Rush Limbaugh was when I was actually in Ithaca, New York, at Cornell, visiting a friend, and I was watching on MSNBC, on CNBC. There's this guy on who's like, who is this guy? He is awesome. He is like saying everything we all believe in, but are afraid to say in public. And he didn't come to the DC Media Market around 91, 92, I believe it was. Because I do remember the day of Bill Clinton's inauguration, Rush was on, and he started the countdown days of occupation by the Democrats. But Rush has been an inspiration to, I think, a whole generation of Republicans and conservatives around the country. And that's my Rush Limbaugh story.
Good. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I first heard of Rush. I think it was I was out in California for the state Republican convention, and I got in my shuttle van to go to the airport out of Sacramento, and the driver actually put Rush Limbaugh on, and I'm like, who is this? My reaction is like yours, like who is this guy? And the driver was effusive. I mean, Rush started in Sacramento with the radio.
Yeah.
But it's pretty amazing, isn't it, though? I mean, there's a guy, you took that thing to, where he says 15 to 20 million listeners a week, nationwide program. He really set the stage. I mean, as you said, Dwight, I mean, he influenced and did a lot for at least a generation of conservatives.
And yeah, and he's also redefined a niche that the right basically was able to capture and use to its benefit to taking our message out. Because back then you just had the good old boy networks of CBS, NBC, and ABC and CNN that were all vehemently anti-Republican. I mean, I like to point out the 60 Minutes Westmoreland interview as People's Exhibit A, that they never had the best interest of regular Americans in their mind. It was until Rush Limbaugh was the counterweight to the 3 and CNN, the cable network, back then.
Yeah, and look, I mean, growing up in the 60s and 70s, when I listened to AM radio, it was very localized in terms of what there were talk shows, whether or not it was the Joy Boys on WRC, with Willard, with Willard Scott, and or you have
Hardin and Weaver.
Hardin and Weaver here and things like that. And that was very much the case across the country. A lot of local, morning, afternoon, drive time talk shows and things like that. But nothing like Rush, had ever occurred before. And so Rush, you look at the Sean Hannitys, the Mark Levins, the Laura Ingrams, and just a whole host of other people who, really would not have had a career, they really helped. I mean, Rush being on the scene, Rush doing what he did, Glenn Beck, all these people, I think, owe a lot to Rush for breaking through and not just saving AM radio, but just creating conservative talk radio, because liberal talk radio is horrible.
Yeah, they had to. They wanted to be. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Does that exist? Liberal talk radio?
They tried, right? What was
NPR,
it?
NPR, you and I, we all pay for it. National
NPR.
National Panhandler Radio.
So I think I'll speak for the other three panelists here, in that I never had to use AM radio as a method of, hearing conservative communication. But at the same time, as a student of history, I can appreciate, Rush Limbaugh really defined a new generation of communication. A lot of it, to channel my inner Mark here, had to do with the FCC dropping the Fairness Doctrine and allowing, during the Reagan era, and allowing this new medium of communication to kind of sweep through nationwide in the 90s. And as you guys mentioned, a whole generation of people came after Rush Limbaugh. I was listening to a speech this week I think it was the year 2000, Mike Pence, that time in the House of Representatives, on the floor saying, I would not be in Congress, if not for Rush Limbaugh. Obviously, Mike Pence went on to.
He was an honorary member of the class of '94, the Congress, the Newt Gingrich Congress, the legendary Congress. I mean, he really, and it's a great loss, without Rush Limbaugh, we would not have Sean Hannity, we wouldn't have Mark Levin. They were both guest hosts for the Rush Limbaugh show in the early years. And you know who else was a guest host on his show? Chris Matthews. Matthews.
For 30 years, right, talk radio was really the predominant conservative communications platform, and it's just recently being replaced by the internet and by podcasts. But Rush Limbaugh really ushered a lot of that in.
Yeah, like our little show.
Even with the fact that I think the influence of conservative talk radio is kind of on the wane a little bit because of the internet, because of the podcast. Rush's influence was still very, very strong, right? I mean, they still had very strong listenership. It's creating a huge void. I mean, if you're premier radio networks, I mean, I think you've been planning for this, but exactly what are you going to do? It's kind of like for a lot of conservatives, kind of like Ronald Reagan. You don't replace a Rush Limbaugh, like you don't replace a Ronald Reagan. Just an iconic figure for conservatives.
Yeah, Dwight and Don, you guys talk about all these people who he influenced and got started. I was, I think, more just time-wise, with him being on more in the middle of the day, just never kind of matched up with my schedule. But I mean, the likes of Sean Hannity and Mark Levin, I mean, those are people, especially Sean Hannity. I mean, that's one of the, he's pretty much the reason I got involved in politics, was first seeing him on TV and then finding out that you could catch him for multiple hours every day.
4 hours a day. That's all Sean asks. Yeah. 4 hours a day.
4
hours a day. And you can DVR his show.
I was in college, and I remember listening to him on the way there, or pulling up. I think I was probably the only person at my age listening to AM in my car at that time. But I know I owe a lot to Sean Hannity, and it's funny you guys mentioning how he wouldn't even really been where he was if it wasn't for the likes of Rush to come along first. So
I do want to say to Ryan is that you can still listen to AM radio. It's not dead yet.
It's not all on F.
My car has a button for it. I haven't pressed it yet to see what it does, but it's there.
So a lot of people listen to Sirius XM as well, right? I mean, they'll use that instead of AM FM even.
In seriousness, also, it's kind of just become a natural evolution of things, right? Because, towards the latter years, the Mark Levins, the Sean Hannitys were also distributed as podcasts and reaching a whole new generation of audiences, on demand. And it really, even, a few years ago, there was an article in the New York Times talking about some of the big conservative podcasters, the likes of Ben Shapiro. And sometimes, you can't replace a Rush Limbaugh, but you can have a next generation, so to speak. And it really, the idea of, that's the person drawing people into conservatism is very valuable. And that's why he deserves, part of the reason he deserves to be honored.
Right. And I will say this, I was thinking about my memories of just all the years of Limbaugh. Some of the things that go back into the early years of when he had his radio program, the liberals, they hated him then as much as they hated him at the end. But it spawned some really interesting activities in the early 90s. One was this
bake sale.
And so they did this thing out in Fort Collins, Colorado. And so I flew out there with a guy from my office, and we brought some of the AIM merchandise, the bumper stickers, and I don't even remember exactly what we had at the time, and we bought a booth and whatnot, and it was all outdoors. And we got up there, we stayed in Denver, but then we drove up to Fort Collins, and we got up there and we did our thing for the day, and Limbaugh came with Snerdley, and they weren't anywhere near the vendors, but we knew they were there. That event was incredible. I mean, Fort Collins is not a huge town, right? It's a college town. It's not a huge town, but it's a liberal college town. There was so much traffic, we heard later on, that they had to shut off the interstate for people who are trying to get into Fort Collins because they could not get any more cars. They could not get any more people into Fort Collins. They had jammed the roads for miles and miles and miles. And there was a similar type of event like that in California that I actually wound up after that one. I think I took 3 other guys with me because it was like, now I'm thinking it's like Russia-palooza is what it was just this, you spend 8 or 9 hours doing stuff. And so, but it was, you name it, every product that was ever invented at the time was there by somebody somewhere at these things, but it was a huge love fest. And, even if Rush wasn't going to show up to an event, the fact that it was ditto heads or would draw out the masses. Unbelievable influence this man had. What upsets me now, though, is just the level of vitriol by the left. They have just been so terrible in this. Like, conservatives sometimes will do this too, but just the things that have been said about Limbaugh in his passing by a lot of liberal leftists, I find to be totally inexcusable at this point.
I totally agree with that. I remember when John Glenn passed away, and I pointed out a mere fact that he was one of the Keating Fives, and I had people say, "Oh, how dare you say that?" At least I say he's back turning toasty brown about now, or he's a horrible, ethically challenged failed astronaut. Didn't say anything like that, but as pointing out a fact about his foibles of him being ethically challenged seemed to rattle the left. But I mean, it pales in comparison. When President Reagan died, you had what's his name mention that, oh, he's turning back toasty brown right about now. When Jerry Falwell died, you had the same type of vitriol hate. You have, so much for that old additive. The only Republicans they seem to like are the ones that have died. No, I mean, these people, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. I wonder what kind of household were these people raised in to speak so ill of the dead.
The wife, in fairness, the hatred and vitriol is not, isolated to the left, and especially at least not to people who claim to be right wing. Right? There's also plenty of people on the right, such as the Lincoln Project.
Yes.
There's lots of hatred and vitriol towards people, claim to be just to defeat Donald Trump, and then they also want to defeat Susan Collins and all of the sort of moderate Republicans that they claim to defend. But things have really started to unravel over there. You have George Conway, big anti-Trump lawyer, also husband to Kellyanne Conway, so that creates an interesting dynamic, I'm sure, in their own household. But that aside,
and Ryan, and now dad to a possible American Idol winner.
Well, I think she's on American Idol. So Claudia Conway,
no real talent, somebody said.
Yeah, so quite a family. But he's calling for the Lincoln Project. I forget if it's to be dissolved or to be instituted with completely new leadership. So you have all sorts of people calling on the Lincoln Project to take accountability for basically covering up for John Weaver being a predator towards 18 to 22-year-old interns. Where is Michael Steele? Michael Steele was the lieutenant governor of Maryland, joined this, supposedly conservative Lincoln Project, was a co-founder of the Lincoln Project, the leader of the Lincoln Project, and has said nothing.
Yeah, Michael Steele, where are you? You're silent. You seem to have no. Maybe you think he's at a brothel or a strip club somewhere spending RNC. Oh wait, no, he doesn't do that anymore because he's not the chair of the RNC. But Michael Steele needs to say something about this, frankly. But he's been silent. Rumor has it he wants to run for governor of Maryland. I'm not sure if he's running as a Democrat or a Republican. Not sure, but I think he's probably going to run as a Democrat in Maryland. But here's the thing. Michael Steele should be ashamed of himself even getting associated with the Lincoln Project. I don't know if any of you guys remember when he ran for U.S. Senate and the Prince George's County NAACP put together an event. Remember, it is the Prince George's County NAACP, but they put together a event where they pelted him with Oreo cookies. They had pictures of him in blackface. Now, there's something wrong with that. And then what does Michael Steele? He's joined them now. He's basically part of their club now. And he is silent on Weaver. Michael Steele, shame on you. Shame on you. I'm ashamed that I ever voted for you.
Dwight, that just makes me think about the time that he spoke at one of the Lincoln dinners we had for the Central.
Yeah.
And I have somewhere, I think, in the house. I think I still have a picture that it was taken.
Oh, I do too.
But I definitely would not display that proudly at this point in time.
He goes on my wall of shame now.
Yeah, just thinking about Steele, though, in terms of running for governor, what is his line of thinking, though? Is it because Hogan has been fairly successful with his anti-Trump, line, basically being against the president before, that he can try to capture that same group? I just don't see that happening.
To quote Lloyd Benson, go ahead.
I wasn't going to say Hogan, but I guess he'd be a good example. I do think there is a big difference between Governor Hogan and maybe some other prominent Republicans who have said that they don't agree with the president on this and that, and maybe they're going to, not fill in any name or fill in somebody who's not the president's name, but also not vote for his opponent in the election versus the Lincoln Project. I mean, for Republicans to get together and raise money and go out of their way as an organized effort to actually hurt the Republican presidential nominee and others is absolutely insane, and they have no place in the Republican Party. If you didn't agree with President Trump and you wanted to sit it out, that's fine. That's on you. But yeah, to actually have an organized effort to ruin the nominee of your party you supposedly belong with. They've got the likes of Michael Steele and the others have no place.
But let me build off what Chris said too. I mean, you can say what you want about Hogan, but at least Hogan did commercials and other things for moderate Republicans in tough districts like Susan Collins. I mean, he was doing commercials for Susan Collins. Right, and the Lincoln Project was actively campaigning for Democrats in those districts for people like Susan Collins, the
guy that beat Cory Gardner,
and I mean, any Lincoln Project guy, or especially Michael Steele, should just stay with MSNBC and cash the checks in.
Jason, even another question too. I mean, you just mentioned MSNBC. MSNBC has been heavily all in on the Lincoln Project. So should they not try to come clean? I'm not expecting it because it's MSNBC, but I mean,
they're embarrassed, Tom. They're embarrassed to say anything about that.
I don't know. At a certain point, you kind of have to respect it. It's a shame, and it's really a disgrace what happened with Weaver, and it's categorically unacceptable. And Steele needs to come clean, as with all the other Lincoln Project leaders, as to what they knew or didn't know and disavow it completely. But, they basically tricked a bunch of, upper middle class liberal Karens into giving them $100 million of money.
They all got rich off of it, right?
And they just paid themselves in consulting fees with the vast majority of that money. I mean, the level of grifting necessary to pull that off is almost impressive if it wasn't so sad.
Hey Ryan, one of the founders of the Lincoln Project was in significant debt. His business was failing, and guess what now?
Rick Wilson. The
Yeah.
same, Rick Wilson's there's another can of worms there. I don't believe in punching down, so I'm not going to go there. But part of the reason for bringing up Michael Steele is there was a Baltimore Sun article. He was floating around the idea of running for governor again. Given his actions, it's not clear which party he'd run as part of. But someone with that level of grifting and lack of character really should not be the governor of Maryland.
Remember his days at the RNC. I mean, he left the place in a mess. The 2012 convention would have been a disaster if it weren't for Reince Priebus and his people that cleaned up Michael Steele's mess. He had that convention was over budget. They basically squandered money on things like going to strip clubs and brothels in Hawaii. Why did the RNC need to have a meeting all the way in Hawaii, which costs a lot of
what
money?
Democrats do.
Exactly. And Michael Steele.
Far better off to have it in Ocean City.
Exactly. They could have done it in Ocean City. Now,
Do they have strip clubs in Ocean City, Dwight?
they probably do, but probably not as expensive as the ones in Hawaii.
Yeah, as fiscal conservatives, they could have at least gone, spent all this money at strip clubs on the mainland. I mean,
no, but my point is this. Michael Steele is proven to be an irresponsible leader. Frankly, he was a horrible RNC chair. I know he likes to say, "Well, no, it wasn't you, Michael. We had great candidates in 2010. You really didn't have much to do with us taking back the House." Excuse me.
So I mean, just trying to wrap up this Lincoln thing. I mean, in terms of Rick Wilson and Steele, these guys, even Steele. I mean, Steele probably. I mean, he probably still has his gig with MSNBC as his commentator, contributor, whatever. But does a Rick Wilson or does a Steve Schmidt get another job somewhere else along the line, or have they made enough
in the Biden White House? Maybe
project they don't need to worry about it.
Maybe the Biden White House.
You collected millions in consulting fees, unless if Wilson blew it like he blew his last fortune, it should be fine.
But Ryan, a fool and their money.
But I don't know. I think that there is some sort of element of an establishment versus not establishment thing here. Of one thing the Lincoln Project was very successful at was cementing the people involved with its status within the political establishment, in spite of previously being supposedly Republicans. Who seem to be being purged from these mainstream institutions. So I think they'll all be fine. They'll get their jobs at CNN or MSNBC, or they'll get to speak at a university and be a visiting fellow at some political science department.
Academia loves Republicans who beat up on their own.
Their great heroic efforts in defeating Donald Trump, where they spent $100 million, or they raised $100 million and spent $100,000 on a billboard in Times Square against Ivanka Trump, and pocketed the other $99,900,000 for themselves.
I want to know what Kellyanne thinks about this whole thing.
Their family dynamic seems to be a little bit, out of respect for the family, we'll give them a little bit of privacy, but it seems
exactly.
Like, you ask for privacy, and then your daughter goes on American Idol and you do the whole montage. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
And by the way, and here is something funny there. Mr. Conaway there, he did have the good sense to call out their morally challenged founder.
Yes, and you know what? I commend him for doing that, right? That's the proper action. Maybe he didn't know. It's quite possible not all of, there's probably a dozen founders of the Lincoln Project. Yeah. I'm sure they weren't all in on the cover-up of, John Weaver's predatory practices.
Where's Michael Steele? That's the one I really care about.
But some of them were. And if you weren't involved, if you were part of that group of 12 people that started, or however many it was that started the Lincoln Project, and you weren't part of that cover-up and you weren't part of enabling him, if that were me, I would want to speak up and distance myself from that and say I wasn't a part of that and I just disavow that. Which is, all the more troubling that Michael Steele is not doing that. But I think we beat a dead horse here.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I agree with Conway. I mean, I think they all just shut this thing down. I mean, that's the best. They've really done, their main goal was to get Trump out of office.
And get rich at the same time.
And he did lose. So in that sense, I mean, what their purpose was going forward, and with all this stuff, if they shut it down, at least they can maybe tamp down the controversy. It could be settled legally in other ways, other issues with the sexual discrimination and other activities that went on with there. But all right, so since we mentioned cover up, we'll segue into a cover up of massive proportions, and that is up in New York with a certain guy, Cuomo.
Baby Doc Cuomo.
Another story the media isn't covering at all.
I will say, Jason, though, I get my CNN news alerts. Fox News was definitely sending more alerts, or they were the only ones sending alerts to my phone. But I've noticed in the last couple of days, even CNN has been jumping on it and sending out. But you're right, they were being quiet, but it sounds like there's too much noise for them to completely ignore it.
Well, it is. I think there is too much noise for them to ignore it. I mean, they have Democrat members of their General Assembly up in New York. I mean, calling for him to either be impeached or resign. I mean, I think it's getting pretty rough for Cuomo up in New York, and I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I think this paves the road for a Republican governor in New York in 2022.
Yeah.
When was the last one we had, Dwight?
George Pataki. I'd love to see Rick Lazio run, or Peter King. He's retired now. Pete King. Pete, I know you're watching us. Run for governor.
The moral of the story is that the Cuomo political dynasty in New York might actually be coming to an end. And I forget what his name, but a Democrat member of the General Assembly up in Albany was, basically spoke out that when he spoke out against Cuomo's cover-up, he got called by the governor and basically cussed out and called an idiot and said, "You're never going to have a future and I'm going to stop you." And he spoke up and people, before, under the Cuomo machine, he would have been suppressed. He would have been stripped of his committee assignments. He would have been told he's old news and primaried, next time around. And, people were signing with him. It didn't kill his career. People and a lot of other elected officials in New York, including Bill de Blasio, who I almost never would agree with, but, said, yeah, but Cuomo bullying is pretty bad. He's being called out. You have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling him out. You have other members, prominent Democrats in New York calling him out. This is not just Republicans. And I think that's why, while I would like for this to end in a Republican governor, I think what really shows that this is the end of the line for Cuomo is when he's getting pushed out from both sides. He has no allies except for his brother, who has a primetime spot on CNN. And they just told him, CNN corporate said, you're not allowed to interview your brother anymore. It's a conflict of interest. So,
by the way, Ryan,
really
is there any truth there's a jet gassed up
in Washington?
Hey, Ryan, is there any truth to the fact that there might be a jet that's gassed and ready to go at Albany Airport to take him to France, like the other Duvaliers went? Or Montreal, actually, that might be closer.
But I think that guy you're talking about, Ryan, that was Ron Kim or something like that.
Yes.
Ron Kim, yes.
I think that was the guy. Yeah. So, so we're seeing a lot of him on Fox, and another guy, a couple of Democratic Assemblymen, they're talking about stripping Cuomo's emergency powers, which they gave him when the pandemic first hit. But yeah, if you've got Democrats in your state assembly, railing against the governor for this is a serious problem. And Cuomo, if he would just come clean and admit the mistake and say, look, we blew it, and apologize and do something, that would help a lot. But he has this tendency, he's trying to pass the buck and just trying to obfuscate the whole thing and say, it's really not me, it's all these other things. It's misreporting, trying to place the blame elsewhere. But he will not, it's not, the buck stops here kind of a mentality at all.
Yeah.
He was passing the buck big time.
I was watching Neil Cavuto on Fox Business this morning, and he had a guest on who made a very good point. So there's really two ways that Cuomo could spin this. Either what he's doing right now, where he says, oh, this is not my fault, this is a sham, the media is crooked. I think he put up a slide during his press conference today saying, in retrospect, every decision I made was right, which is just the most absurd thing he could possibly say.
Right.
Or he could spin it as, there was a ton going on. Nobody knew what was happening in March. We didn't have, it was chaotic. We didn't have our systems in place and we counted wrong and we're sorry. And, if he would just own up to it, treat it as a mistake and spin it that second way, he could come out of this relatively unscathed, but he's choosing to double down and it doesn't seem that he'll win.
Ryan, this is what Governor Cuomo does, is he asks himself, could this be me? no way I could have done anything wrong. So I'm going to start blaming everybody. It's like that old, was it the NFL network commercial where the player says, he goes, you first look at yourself and then you go, and the guy that's interviewing goes, all the great ones do that. But it can't be you. So I'm going to start blaming everyone.
The question I want to pose to the panel is, do you think they'll take away his Emmy?
Well, I mean, there's been talk, about people should demand that he return the Emmy. There should be a movement to do that, return that Emmy. I mean, talking about the hubris. I mean, to win that special Emmy and then to go on and to blatantly lie about the situation and cover this thing up. Yeah, he's not deserving of this at all.
I've got the Republican candidate for governor, Janice Dean. Should run for governor of New York as the Republican. Her in-laws were murdered by.
She's been speaking out against Cuomo for a long time. I mean, long before
let's
other
just
people
call it what
picked
it
it up.
is. It was murder. The governor murdered all those people by sending them to retirement homes where they could die, and that is exactly. It's kind of like when the French in the '90s. All the rich folks left the city and left the old people in Paris to die without air conditioning. It's kind of like that. And that, I believe, caused the fall of the French government as a result. And I think Mario Cuomo should, if this was Governor Donald Trump, they would be saying, oh, he should be charged with involuntary manslaughter. I think we should charge Cuomo with involuntary manslaughter here, frankly.
Well, I will say that, I mean, I think, as you guys were saying, I mean, Janice Dean has been amazing. I mean, I think, this issue would not be front and center, would not be as big an issue if it wasn't for Janice Dean and her heartbreaking story about her in-laws, and she has the ability. I mean, there's no politics for her about this. She's a senior meteorologist for Fox News. She's not in a political, job at all.
Mm-hmm.
She's just talking about this personal situation. And she just kept harping on it, pushing that narrative, and then you find out some other stories along the way. But this could have, if you're Cuomo, you're trying to bury this thing as fast as you can, but it's beyond his control right now, and he's in big trouble, I think.
I mean, by the way, is MSNBC doing an interview like they did after Katrina about these people died because of President Bush's inactions? These people did. First of all, nobody died in Katrina because of President Bush. These people died directly because Cuomo was dereliction of duty. He was not doing his job as the governor. He should be one, he should be impeached. Two, he should be charged for involuntary manslaughter, frankly. And I think the good people of New York who are a victim of Governor Cuomo's inactions should sue the state and sue Cuomo personally. Where do they go to get their families back? This guy doesn't even want to take responsibility for what he did. He should be made to pay. Now, will that happen? I don't know. But I think if there's any good lawyers out there who want to make a name for themselves, class action lawsuit against the state of New York.
For a guy who spent the last 4 years just bashing the president, or former President Trump, and especially over the last year of the pandemic, I mean, it almost seems like he's kind of taking a page out of President Trump's book by doubling down, by not backing up, not apologizing, the trademark moves of Trump that he was quick to bash. But yeah, the whole thing is horrible, but you couldn't this scandal couldn't happen to a better person. So.
Yeah.
And Chris, something tells me that despite similar patterns of behavior, Andrew Cuomo will not be getting banned from Twitter and Facebook.
No, he will not be. By the way, the quote, our other, thank God, former President Barack Hussein Obama's pastor would say, Cuomo's chickens have come home to roost.
All right, let's go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that, one other thing, and I've said this on this show for months since, March and April, is that the most unfairly treated person during this entire pandemic who's been vindicated yet again is Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. So, back in April and May, especially, it would be common to see a CNN article or a tweet saying, Andrew Cuomo is the example of how to handle the pandemic, and then Florida is the example of how not to handle the pandemic. So let's look back. It seems that we're on the tail end of this. Let's look back at how things went. Florida did much better than the average state, especially when look at it on a per capita basis, which is the fair way to look at it. In terms of COVID fatalities, while staying almost completely open and allowing their citizens to live freely by specifically targeting their remedies towards senior citizens and protecting the elderly population, who are really the people disproportionately at risk of getting seriously sick from this, versus New York, who shut everyone down, killed countless jobs in a non-targeted manner, and almost did the opposite in specifically targeting the death towards the old people. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think they would do it on purpose, but total mismanagement of the situation. Especially, we knew early on that old people were, it's a contagious disease. It's spread, you breathe out the droplets, it's spread that way, and old people are especially hit by it. It shouldn't have taken a genius to not send people to nursing homes who had COVID. And New York was one of only 3 states that did it. It was New Jersey and then one other state.
And
my point being,
yeah.
Ron DeSantis was slandered. He deserves an apology from the liberal media.
And Ryan, furthermore, they had the USS Comfort. They had the Javits Center, where buried Hillary's campaign there.
They ended up not really using those.
No,
boats,
and you know why they
ships.
Yeah, they couldn't use it because it was President Trump that sent the Comfort up. That's what it came down to. They didn't want to take advantage of stuff that the president was giving them. So
I think it was less that and more they just wanted to make the show that they would need the hospital boats, and then they didn't actually need them. I mean, New York's hospital capacity was stretched pretty thin, but the people that were saying that there was going to be no hospital space and they were going to need the boats, that just never came true. It wasn't like they were choosing to have people die in the streets so they wouldn't use a Trump hospital boat. It was just
I hate to say it, Ryan. Maybe it's my age, but I will say
it didn't end up materializing.
It fits their narrative better if people are dying in the streets. I hate it. It sounds morbid, but that's what they are. The Democrat Party is a morbid party.
Guys, I went and took the initiative, and I got back his Emmy. I went and stole it.
Oh, there you go. Well, good job, Dr. Tomlinson.
Excellent prop.
I knew this thing would come in handy one day.
Yeah. Ryan, to what you were saying, that I saw the Johns Hopkins figures on the per capita, the other day, and except for the number of cases, Florida was doing so much better than New York. The hospitalizations and the deaths were far lower than New York, and which makes that point that you were saying. Governor DeSantis, he did an incredible job. He reopens the state. There are jobs there. There are people actually able to do things there, and they're not dying, like they are in New York.
Florida's had month-over-month job growth every single month since March. Obviously there was a bit of a drop at first when everyone was panicking, and it's come back since then because Florida's allowed their state to reopen. And the thing they realized, to your point on cases, is they realized very early on that if a young person like Jason or myself or Chris gets it, unless if we have some other serious underlying condition, we're not going to die of COVID, right? As long as we don't give it to a senior citizen or someone with a serious condition, that's really not something worth shutting down over. It's almost a good thing in the sense that you're helping build immunity among the population. So Florida was very targeted, very smart about it. And as such, they were able to stay open with not disastrous consequences. It really, thinking ahead to 2024 presidential candidates, I think Ron DeSantis' leadership under crisis puts him towards the top of my list.
Yes.
Another thing that Ron DeSantis did that I don't think we touched on yet is that Ron, like I know him like he's my friend, Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis never closed the schools. That's one thing that I think a lot of parents would like, is that he never closed the school. In Anne Arundel County, we've had 2 kids commit suicide this month, but not one kid of school age has died of COVID in this county. So
the thing about Florida too is just that, Florida got a lot of criticism because, beaches and other things, people where crowds were gathering and things like this. But, it's just, if you put some protocols into place and if you get people to following, but you also give them some freedom of movement and a chance to make these choices, they will generally make the right choice, and because there's a lot of young people that will go to Florida for certain things, they're highly unlikely to actually contract or die from COVID. This mentality by these liberal Democrats, running these states, they're killing their states, they're killing the economies of their states, as well as unfortunately killing the population along the way with these decisions that they've made.
And Don, you make a great point about the young people, especially because that was another one of the big stories, right? Is, on MSNBC, they were going, these all opening the beaches is going to be a super spreader event, and all these young people are going to die of COVID because they're opening the beach.
And it didn't happen.
If you're going to go and do something out social during a pandemic that's spread through respiratory droplets, the beach is one of the best places you can be. You're out in the sun, you're in outdoor air. You're generally spread apart from other people anyways, just because you don't stand right on top of someone at the beach. I mean, it's the perfect place to be, as opposed to, going into someone's house privately. When you close stuff down, you're not really stopping.
See, Ryan, I got to interject real quick. That's why Governor Christie was at a beach, 2 years before the pandemic, when he was just preparing.
He was preparing. He was ahead of his time. It's like when you see people wearing masks from before, but
that's why Ted Cruz went to the beach too, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's a great segue actually to our next topic.
Yes.
I love how we've been segueing from one thing to another.
I know.
Which is
and they all run it.
Ryan wanted to make sure Lincoln Project got up on the list, and he segued to that early, and we're just rolling along.
This is a good group here, but we've got Texas obviously is having a really tough time with the snowstorms. There's a lot to unpack there, but it's almost been in the national media overshadowed by Senator Ted Cruz choosing to take a vacation to Cancun instead of staying in the state of Texas. So,
well, he works very hard, Ryan. Okay, he is entitled to a vacation. Shame on anyone for denying some. As I was once told, when somebody told me I can't afford to take a vacation, I go, well, don't take a vacation then. Shame on me for denying somebody a vacation. Same way I say, shame on anyone that deny. I mean, Senator Cruz works very hard. I mean, I've met some of his coworkers. They're not the friendliest people in the world. They're downright rotten scoundrels, frankly, some of his coworkers, And he just went through a very stressful situation, a few weeks ago.
Well, and Dwight, he was trying to be a good dad and go down there with his daughters and make sure they were okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, frankly, also to be the devil's advocate for Ted Cruz here is, what was he supposed to do, right? They want him to stay in Texas so he can do the stereotypical photo shoot of a politician handing out toilet paper during a power outage. Like that's really helping anything, right? It
could have thrown toilet paper like Trump did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, based on how he's beaten Jimmy Kimmel in basketball at least once, I think he would be pretty good at that. But it's kind of ridiculous. That's like the classic, politician thing is they wear their jacket with the state emblem on it and they go out and they hand out food and they take pictures. But really, if anything, they're making the process slower because they're drawing a bunch of press attention to it.
And Ryan, this is probably before your time, but this is exactly what the media did about President Bush. You would have a presidential motorcade in the middle of a natural disaster. Everyone was whining about, oh, the president didn't come to New Orleans soon enough. You wanted to clog up the streets and so on to prevent first responders from getting to help the people that need the help. You guys want to see the president and his presidential motorcade? These people don't seem to understand.
You know what? At the end of the day, Senator Cruz is doing the best of both worlds. He was a good dad. He brought his daughters to Cancun, and he'll be back out on Monday taking pictures, handing out toilet paper like a good politician.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, look, he admitted it was a mistake in a sense. I mean, in this day and age, politicians have to just remember to think about, what I hate the word, the optics and how it looks. When you've got Facebook and Twitter and everything else out there, people react very quickly. The opposition is just, they can't wait. They love that picture of him in the airport, and all of these things. The revelation about the text with Heidi Cruz and the how much money that was going to cost per night to stay in the resort and all of these things. And I mean, look, Ted Cruz is a citizen of the United States, right? I mean, he has a right to take a vacation when he wants to take a vacation, but timing probably was not optimal.
I want to circle back with this with another politician that basically was throwing a party when he was telling everyone you can't do this and you can do that. Soon to be recalled Governor Newsom of California at the French Laundry dinner when he said, "Oh, you can't do this." Look at him, and that was where I think a bottle of wine is about 150,
Yeah,
200 bucks.
Dwight, COVID can't spread at $1,000 a plate dinners because he can't afford to get in.
No, but I mean, or like people talk about the money he spent. What about all the money Nancy Pelosi spends on ice cream? I think she should save that and spend some on a good plastic surgeon. I know she's got a name of a great one because I sent her a name of a plastic surgeon. And a friend of mine in Burbank,
Well, I want to, on this whole Texas thing, we talk about Cruz here, but there is this other thing to unpack or to discuss for a few minutes, at least in terms of
green energy.
There's been a lot of blame forced, upon green energy and for the failure of this. The pictures of the wind turbines that were frozen and stuff like that. I mean, I've got a friend of mine who's just like, he's all over that. But it's not as simple as green energy failed and that's the problem. This was a major weather event that, very unexpected for Texas, and temperatures plummeted. And that created a lot of problems, even for fossil fuel, type of things. I mean, the gas plant, the coal plants, nuclear plants, they had trouble as well. Like the temperatures were so low, water pipes have been frozen. They couldn't get the water they needed to run things. So it's not, to me, I think you have to be fair and say this is not, you can't just blame this on the fact that, Texas has devoted a certain percentage of their energy to green energy. Plus the fact that, they're also their own grid in essence, right? Their own electrical grid. They run their own grid. This is for the free market so they can deregulate as they wish. But the state has really been run by Republicans, and Republicans have been equally at fault for signing off on these deals to give the tax credits to green energy and to promote these things. So, Republicans are not blameless on this. As much as I don't want to, I don't want to say, but I'd love to say the Green New Deal, is at fault here for this. I can't honestly say that it's completely at fault for all of this.
No, see, we can't, look, the Republicans are not, beyond blame. But I'll tell you this. This is a once in 100-year freeze in Texas. So much for that global warming hoopla they all talk about. Oh, wait, now it's climate change. But climate changes every day. We had ice yesterday, we have sunshine today. It changed, But at the end of the day, they all talk about, global warming, because that's what we all kind of agree on. That's what they really mean, but when they say climate
Weather
change.
is not climate.
Right.
Exactly.
Waiting for Time Magazine then, Dwight, to come back with the coming Ice Age covers that they had.
Oh, that's coming. That's coming. It might be actually, I've dug up. I might have to find that cover and put it up. Coming Ice Age, But here's the thing: here's the folks. I know a lot of folks in Texas. They are resilient people. You don't see them whining on television out in front of the stadiums that haven't eaten for 5 days when the hurricane only hit 3 days ago. But you don't have Texans are self-reliant. I've got a friend of mine. He's a doctor in San Antonio. They lost water. They lost power. Are they complaining? Are they going to blame society? No, they've actually solved that problem. My friend's wife, she wheeled and dealed and negotiated and got what she needed. That's just Texas ingenuity, and that's, far cry from, let's say if this happened in New York, they'd be blaming everyone and their cousin for this if it happened in New York.
Who's handling just as good, Dwight? The folks out in Oklahoma.
That is true.
Because
I think
they haven't gotten
bias there. What's that?
They haven't gotten any news coverage whatsoever, and they're
when did
they're
Oklahoma
doing just as good.
Oklahoma.
But here's the thing, Jason, has Oklahoma ever had a hit TV series about oil and the oil industry? No.
No, it has not.
That's why Texas gets more.
It is also interesting.
Although Texas never had a hit musical called Oklahoma.
Texas is basically its own electrical grid, which I didn't know until this happened. Most other states are connected to other states, and people are trying to use this as some opportunity to dunk on Republican leadership in Texas. You really, a statewide power. You really couldn't have predicted this type of event and been like, they should have known to not have their power grid not connected to other states. It's like that. I mean, that is an example of hindsight is, 2020. And like, it's just like such a unique set of circumstances that led to it. So like, really like that's just kind of a stupid argument. I do think it is worth looking a little bit at, the electricity sources, but you can't blame it all on green energy. I mean, the reality is whether the input is coal, wind, solar, even my preferred energy source of nuclear power. If
nuclear power is clean
all the way when it's not normally sustaining that load, it's going to put stress on the electrical grid. That's just the way it is.
This whole Ted Cruz little scandal reminds me of this little Carroll County political anecdote from 20.
Also, the only county that gets real snow too, by the way.
Yeah, we get real snow. I think most of you are familiar with Delegate Haven Shoemaker. But before he was delegate, he was just a little small town mayor, and he was challenging longtime incumbent county commissioner in a hard race. And I believe this was the winter. I believe it was the winter storm. It was either December 2009 or January 2010. We had a blizzard, and she did the same thing. Got out of town, went to California, had a good time, and I wasn't involved in Haven's campaign at the time, but his campaign, they sent out they made a postcard and they sent out to all the voters, looking like it came from her, saying, thanks for the,
Oh yeah, I remember that. I saw that.
I enjoyed the sun while you guys were back home, and then they flipped it over and then it said vote for Haven or something. But
by the way, before all your times, I think Donna remembers this. The last time the Redskins went to the Super Bowl, the 2 times, the mayor of Washington, D.C., Marion Barry, mayor for life, was in California. We got hit with such a snowstorm. I mean, this is back when D.C. had to put snowplows attached to garbage trucks to move the snow because they didn't have enough snowplows. It's kind of, politicians, they decided to leave Dodge in the middle of as a major snowstorm is coming. I don't care if the Redskins were in the Super Bowl that year. Mr. Mayor, you should have stayed in town. But that's a problem with these, ethically challenged.
But before we go up to final thoughts, let's just get a quick go round in terms of since we last met, we've had, President Trump, he's been acquitted and everything like this. I mean, what are the thoughts and the Democrats' reaction?
I tell you,
I just want to comment on, there was a bill, I think, in the House to ban presidents who have been twice impeached from having federal buildings named after them or from being buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And I think that's just, the most petty and really, for lack of a better word, stupid thing that you could possibly do, right? Like, one, he wasn't actually convicted either time, but two, who really cares, right? Like, Trump doesn't need to have federal buildings named after him. He's got plenty of his own anyways, but
exactly,
it's just I say this really not just to Democrats, although they seem to need it more, but really to everyone, is it's time to move on, right? Trump is not the president anymore. We can focus on the future. I tend to be a forward-looking person, and if we make all of politics for the next, 100 years about what people did in January 2021, it's going to be exhausting and not really very productive. So it's time to start focusing on the policies of the future and not, what people may or may not have done during the Trump presidency.
Jason?
I mean, I had a bunch of vitriolic triggered remarks just by posting acquitted twice, with the president's picture, triggered so many lefties. I mean, I had to end up blocking somebody who was violating my community standards. I gave him 3 warnings, and even then he wouldn't, and I had to finally block him. But
you
probably
3 strikes and you're out. That's the Dwight rule.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
You'll also be blocked if you criticize Shamrock Shakes
or Spiro Agnew or Richard Nixon. But honestly, okay, I would like to know how these Democrats will be behaving. I mean, they're behaving horribly right now, and they successfully stole a presidential election. But what would be happening if they lost? If President Trump was reelected, it would have been the Democrats that would have been storming the Capitol. And CNN reporters would be saying, a mostly peaceful protest here. That's what would have happened, you know. So they would have been climbing the walls of fence over to the White House, too. I could see that happening as well.
I want to get Jason, Chris, your thoughts about the acquittal and the Democrats' reaction.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I took away from it was Trump's response to Mitch McConnell after his whole he voted to acquit Trump, but then he really went after him on the Senate floor, and then he had a Wall Street Journal op-ed, and then Trump basically came back and said that you only won because of me, and we're going to start primarying people that support you. And it's really Trump's first thing since leaving office saying that he's not going to go anywhere, or he's still going to be involved in we'll have to wait and see how much that'll actually be true and how much he will be involved.
Chris?
Obviously we all know it was a giant waste of time from the beginning. I hope the Democrats remember this years down the road when the Republicans have firm control and we do this same thing, which I'm not saying we should, but I mean, now that they've opened this door, I am pretty confident that in my lifetime the Republicans will end up pulling some kind of same stunt, whether it be against Barack Obama or some future Democrat, or hey, I mean, like they've joked, can we go back and impeach dead presidents? I mean, do you even have to be alive? Yeah, I think we'll end up getting, as the Republicans, the last laugh on this when we come back and flip this on them and impeach some long forgotten Democrat president just to get under their skin. So I hope the Democrats have enjoyed, I hope they're enjoying this now, because I'm sure we will flip this back on them sometime in the future.
Yeah. One takeaway I get from this is that Donald Trump is living rent-free in the heads of a lot of Democrats like Nancy Pelosi. At this point in time, it's just they can't get away from it. All right, Dwight, it's time for final thoughts.
Yes, final thoughts. It's my favorite part of the show where we get to share a few things. Before we get to that, I do want to tell everyone, Governor Ehrlich and former First Lady Kendall Ehrlich have a podcast called The Bottom Line. Subscribe, give them 5 stars, because we've got the Britney Spears haters.
Give them 5 stars.
What's that?
Even if you don't listen to them, give them 5 stars.
Yeah, exactly. The Britney Spears. Let me tell you what's happened is the Britney Spears haters have gone on to Spotify and iTunes and started trying to dox Kendall Ehrlich, for her calling out the skank, Britney Spears, for a skank that she was many, many moons ago. I'm sorry, you people, get over yourselves. So everyone, subscribe to the governor's podcast and the First Lady's. Give it 5 stars. Give it high marks, and listen to it, annoy your liberal friends by downloading the podcast every week. Now to final thoughts. Jason, you want to go first?
Sure. I'll give a Maryland college basketball update. I mean, if you started the show tonight, I was like this. I was watching the UMBC Retrievers take on the Vermont Cats. I don't know what they are.
UMBC has a basketball team?
Yeah, they're the only 16 seed to ever beat a 1 seed. One of my friends.
But I think Maryland basketball, I think Terps, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know. So the season's coming down to the wire, but I think we have a pretty good chance to get 2 Maryland teams into the tournament. I mean, if UMBC wins their conference tournament, they'll be in, and Maryland's got to win, I think, at least 3 of their last 4 games, and we could see them as like an 8 or 9 seed in the tournament. So that's taking place completely in Indiana.
Right.
Are they going to have fans this year for March Madness, or?
I think some.
I think they said like 25%, maybe.
Yeah.
25%. Chris, final thoughts?
My final thought will be, since we talked about Governor DeSantis, or as Jason calls him, Ron, back in his college days, they were old roommates, old Ron Dwan and Jason. If Governor DeSantis, anybody who follows me on Facebook knows, and I am embarrassingly a grown adult pro wrestling fan who attends WrestleMania every year, and last
They
year
still do that?
who attends WrestleMania every year, and last year it got canceled. But there's a good chance it's going to happen this year in Florida. And if Governor DeSantis makes WrestleMania happen, and I get to leave Carroll County and go to Florida in April, I think I'll be quitting my job, and I will officially be joining the Governor DeSantis for President 2024 campaign, because I will owe him big if he makes my WrestleMania dreams come true this year.
Ryan? You have
Sure.
anything?
Chris, I'll be right there with you, co-chairing Maryland for Ron DeSantis. But I wanted to make my final thought about, Jason's comment with men's basketball. Virginia Tech, the Hokies, number 18 in the AP poll, will probably be, if we don't let it slip, hopefully a 5 seed in the tournament. And I look forward to us making it further than both of the Maryland teams and winning the national championship.
Don?
Yeah, I just want to say that just kind of love how Minnesota has reacted after all the riots and then the defund the police movement. And now it's been announced they're going to spend $6.4 million to recruit more police officers because the crime has spiked. This is a lesson I think a lot of us, we knew this was going to happen, right? All of this stuff was just.
Wait, you mean when they defunded the police, crime actually went up?
Yeah, surprise, shock of all shocks, right? So.
I did not see that coming. Yeah. I thought everyone held hands and sung Kumbaya when that happened. Okay, my final thought, the most fun. One, I want to say, everyone, we are at the second happiest time of the year, Shamrock Shake season. Get your Shamrock Shakes. They came out this past Monday, and they'll be gone March 18th. At 12:01 in the morning. You will not be able to get a Shamrock Shake because McDonald's wages war on the Irish still. That's my other final thought is, again, seriously, do subscribe to Governor Ehrlich's podcast. It is awesome, and give him high marks. And let's open up schools again soon in person, because that I hate Robin Ficker got a little bit of flack about what he posted this week on Facebook about opening schools, but he isn't wrong there. Just saying. My final thought is let's open the schools up because kids learn better when they're in class, frankly. Anything else before we sign off, everyone?
Thanks for letting me join. It's my first time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on again at some point.
And if anybody doesn't think that Britney Spears is a skank, please let Dwight know.
Yes. And Britney Spears, shame on you. You owe our first lady an apology.
And I've got nothing bad to say about Britney Spears. She came out when I was in middle school, so as a young boy, I had the picture up on my wall, so I got nothing but love for Britney Spears in 1998.
All right, with that, I think we should call it a show, Dwight.
Yes. Good night, everyone.